Good morning, students of class ninth. In the previous video, we have discussed that what were the circumstances and under what conditions did the King of France Louis XVI accepted that now France will become a constitutional monarchy from an absolute monarchy, right? But during that time period between when the revolution break out and the king accepted and the new constitution was made, there were some important events that took place, and in today's video we are going to discuss about those events only. Okay, so first of all, let us discuss about the first event, that neighboring countries were worried about France being a constitutional monarchy, right? See, whenever there is a change in the political system of any country, the countries neighboring to it started making efforts that the system should not change, because if the system there will change in the neighboring country, then in their own country there might be changes, the people might get aware of those changes and they might favor the changes, right? So when France become a constitutional monarchy from being an absolute monarchy, the powers of the king were reduced, right? So when this process was happening between 1789 to 1791, the kings of Persia and Austria, right? The kings of Persia, Prussia, sorry, it's not Persia, it's Prussia. Prussia, Prussia. The kings of Prussia and Austria demanded that this process should stop, right? They were worried about the process and they wanted that there should be absolute monarchy, right? They favored absolute monarchy, and they favored that the change in the political system should not take place in France. They were against that, right? I hope the first point is clear to you, that the neighboring countries were worried that if there will be a absolute monarchy, then the public in their respective countries would also demand for constitutional monarchy, and they wanted that there should be absolute monarchy in the country. See what is written. The neighboring countries were apprehensive of the ongoing movements in France and demanded the restrainment of monarchy. Austria and Persia were the most affected, since their rulers were related to the Queen of France. Now, the rulers of Austria and Prussia were related to the Queen of France, and that is one of the reason that why they also wanted that the kingdom should remain a absolute monarchy. Okay, so neighboring countries were worried. I hope the first point is clear. Next, see, as we know that from the previous stories, from the previous videos, that the condition in France economically was not very good, right? Because the people of France were poor, the crop also failed, and due to the crop failure there were crises known as subsistence crisis. Means to all we can refer that from the all the situations we can conclude that there was shortage of grains, right? There was shortage of grains in the country. Shortage of grains was there, right? Means there was shortage of grains in the country, and when there was shortage of grains in the country, this was the reason that the people were thinking that that the king and the queen had large amount of grains stored in their castles, right? In the palace of Versailles there was a large amount of grains which were stored, the people thought that, and the people wanted that the king should move with with her queen. The king should move with her queen to Paris instead of the palace of Versailles. Okay, so it is written, the country was facing an acute shortage of food and a bad economy, and a word spread that the queen has hoarding grain at the palace of Versailles. It was a word, it was a rumor in the place of France that the queen there is holding a lot of grains there in the palace of Versailles. So what the people do? Women from Paris armed themselves and led a march to the palace and compelled the royal couple to move to Paris, where they were under the direct watch of the people. So what happened, that the couple, the royal couple, that was the king Louis XVI and her and his queen, they both were compelled to move from the palace of Versailles to the city of Paris. Right, and in Paris they were under direct watch of the people, and it was done by the women, basically, the because the women were the people who marched from their homes to the palace of Versailles with arms and demanded that the king should move to Paris instead of the palace of Versailles. Okay, so royal couple was forced to move to Paris from Versailles. Next, when the king was in Paris, when the king was in Paris, he was feeling very bad because his powers were being limited, and he was he was under house arrest because the people had a strict eye on the king, that what was happening, what was the king doing. So the king was extremely unhappy with this, and he tried to flee from there. He tried to escape from the city of Paris. From there he wanted to go somewhere else, but he was then captured by the people, and the people put him under the house arrest, right? So what it is written, the Louis XVI was extremely unhappy with the situation of reducing power and status. He tried to flee from Paris along with the queen, but they were captured by the public and brought back to the palace and put under house arrest. Okay, so I hope it is clear that the people were having a strict eye on the king, and when the king tried to move from the palace, he tried to flee away from the palace. He was from Paris, not palace. He was When he was trying to flee away from Paris, he was captured by the people, and he was then again put under house arrest by the people. Means house arrest means that a situation when you are put inside a house, you are given all the facilities, that you are not in a prison, but you are given all the facilities that you have in a house, but you cannot move out of that house. That is house arrest. Okay, and in Hindi the word is nazarband for that. Okay, so, and there were also a signature campaign. There was also a signature campaign organized by anti-monarchy groups, because there were some people belonging to the third estate of the remaining citizens, which was considering of businessmen and artisans and peasants. They wanted that there should be constitutional monarchy in the country, but some people felt beyond that, and they felt that there should be no monarchy, and they were against monarchy. That is why they were called anti-monarchy, and they were having a signature campaign that people should sign a petition which states that there should be democracy in the country instead of monarchy, right? So the anti-monarchy groups organized a signature campaign to declare the country a republic, but the troops opened fire on them, killing nearly 50 members, thus causing more unrest, right? So, and the groups were opened by fire, were shot by fire, right? And when they were shot, there was great unrest among the people. I hope major incidents what happened during the period of 1789 to 91 is clear to you. Now let me remind you very important thing. The period of 1789 to 1791 is important because 1789 was the time period when the French Revolution started. Okay, it was a time period when the French Revolution started. And 1791 was a time period when the French Revolution came to an end, because the king accepted that there should be that the demands of National Assembly, the third citizens, the remaining citizens of the third estate is to be fulfilled, and in 1789 the king accepted that. But in 1791, it took 2 years for the people of France to make a constitution, to frame the constitution, right? So it took 2 years, and in 1791 only was the year when the constitution was applicable, right? Now we are going to discuss about the effect on everyday life of the people, that what was the effect done on the, what was the impact made on the life of people after the changing of France from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy, right? So let us discuss what were the changes, what were the aftermaths of the constitution, right? So let us discuss that. See, the new regime wanted to change everything which affected the common man. They abolished many laws which were invoked during the old regime. Right. During the old regime, during the older period when there was King Louis XVI and he was having absolute monarchy in the country. At that time, the king had all the powers. Right. We have already discussed that. But after the constitution was made and it was, if it was made into effect, it came into effect. After that, the first thing that happened was king was the head of the state, right? King was the head of the state, right? He was the head of the state. But king's power was limited, and the power of the king was limited, and there were separate heads for legislature, the person making the law, the organization making the law, executives, and the third one was judiciary, right? Earlier king was the executive, king was the judiciary, and king was the legislature. But after the making of the constitution, the legislature, executive, and judiciary were different now, right? The legislature, executive, and judiciary were different now. So here it is. And there was also earlier a law of censorship. There was a law of censorship, which meant that whatever media, whether it is a print media, right? Earlier there were no televisions at that time, so there were only books, right? So there were only books or songs played by the people. So all the media, whether it was books or newspapers or songs, right? So whatever media was there, it was under strict censorship by the clergy. The clergy was there, and there was strict censorship by the clergy, that anything which need to be printed was strictly seen by clergy, that whether it is not against the king or the first two estates, if it was not so, then only it was allowed to be published, whether it was books, newspapers, or songs, right? But after that, the law of censorship was abolished, it was removed. And when the law of censorship was removed, now the people had a right to freedom of expression, because now they were ready to write whatever they want. They were ready to write in their papers, in their magazines, in their books, in their newspapers, and in their even their songs, or in their enchantments, or in their plays. They want to depict anything. So they were ready to depict anything in that, because now there was a greater freedom of expression. And from there only the ideas of liberty, justice, and freedom spread all over the country. After the abolishment of the law of censorship, there was spread of the ideas of spread of the ideas of what? Three things. First of all, that is freedom. The other thing is your justice, and the third thing is your liberty. Okay, the spread of the idea of freedom, justice, and liberty took place after the law of censorship was abolished, and then only the ideology of the people was enlightened in France. So I hope students you must have understood that what change in everyday's life came, right, and what were the major incidents during the period of 1789 to 1791. In the next video, we will discuss about major changes that were taken place after the constitutional monarchy was made. Right. Till then, stay home and stay safe. Thank you.